Hey, my name is Mark Kavich. I'm an undergrad student studying geology at the University of Manitoba and working to become someone knowledgeable in the field of geological sciences and the climate sector. Today, I'll be giving a short rundown of the role of carbon dioxide in climate change and as well break down the fundamental concepts surrounding this issue and what has the potential to be done. To start with the technical giant that is climate change, I'm going to assume that basic knowledge regarding the Industrial Revolution and scientific definitions are already known. To summarize though, the 19th century saw the widespread use and development of various energy-producing methods and machines for mass production and factory output. For energy, biomass like wood and charcoal was dominant pre-industrial and later petroleum post-industrial. Over time, alternative and greener renewable energy sources became prominent, though even today the use of fossil fuels reigns supreme. Scientists, however, have determined that the byproducts of burning these biomass and petrofuels produce great amounts of gases like carbon dioxide, methane, hydrocarbons, and sulfur dioxide. These gases recycle and move over time in nature, though with significant output, much of this harmful gas remains in the air, while solar radiation is absorbed and re-emitted in all directions by these same particles, heating the planet and causing gradual changes to the Earth's climate. In 1896, the first proposal that emissions of carbon dioxide into the atmosphere can incite warming can be attributed to Swedish chemist and physicist Svante Arrhenius. And since then, thanks to the efforts of thousands of scientists and people, the climate problem is both a monumental scientific and human effort, valued in working together in an attempt to solve a global problem. Further, and as well expanded upon later, is the question of why an increase in greenhouse gases would be a problem for us. The short answer is that the world will not look like Cancun in 100 years. Notice the later and later dates as well of initial snowfall in many cities and countries, coupled with routine hottest summer on record headlines. But surely something's going on, right? Well, at the root of this global concern, what is carbon dioxide? Simply, carbon dioxide is a gaseous molecule composed of one carbon and two oxygen atoms. It is soluble in water, clear as a gas, non-toxic, and is generally inert. CO2 is usually made in small amounts when organic creatures exhale outwards and is then absorbed by plants, algae, and other goobers that undergo photosynthesis, so what's the big deal? See, there's this little thing called the carbon cycle, and its elementary description is in actuality quite destructive. Respiration releases CO2, which is then absorbed by plants or bodies of water. These plants or organisms then die, get buried under sediment over a long period of time, fossilize, and then get dug up by pesky humans who like using the natural gas and oil made up from their respective decompositions. Humans need this fuel and burn it for energy, which powers their stuff. The problem, however, lies in balance. When there's too much emission with not enough absorption, the carbon cycle hangs around this little middle ground between steps 1 and 2, in that emissions don't get unemitted. But for those wondering where it's all coming from, it's unsurprising then to easily learn that it's the big players and manufacturers of the world who have the highest energy bills. After the Industrial Revolution, the United States was one of the first countries, and currently still, to retain a heavily fossil fuel-based economy, out-emitting both China and Russia combined all through the 18th century and up to 2021. In the main figure, we can see that the USA was the top emitter at nearly a quarter of the entire world's CO2 output single-handedly. Per capita is a different story, however. Taking note of the fact that the US has less than a quarter of the population of China, we can see that the Chinese populace amounts nearly thrice that of the US citizen in terms of emissions due to its major exportings, but surely this will be of no major consequences, right? Firstly, let it be known that weather and climate are different things. Weather is the state of or short-term variations in the atmosphere ranging from minutes to days, while climate is essentially a vast set of averages relative to how the surface system of Earth is over months or years. Recall that solar radiation and its interactions regarding greenhouse gases incite warming, though affects regions primarily along and above the equator into the northern hemisphere. More on this later. Climate change is both real and was real many times. Heck, we are literally in an ice age right now, the Quaternary glaciation as it's known. Supervolcanoes of the past have been capable of releasing so much gas that climate change can be incited by them alone. For reference, here's what Mount St. Helens looked like when it erupted in 1980, and here's its emission relative to the Tobol supervolcano from 70,000 years ago. Yep. But climate change takes a while to happen, right? Sure, but it would be more accurate to say that it takes a while to start. Basically, regarding our present and future with an increasing demand for energy, which incites an increasing level of emissions, surely these trends or statistics will not be linear. Ergo, the concept of exponential growth. Starts small and massive, but it's easier to visualize with the concept of doubling, or rather the time it takes for something to increase by a factor of 2, be it lily pads in a lake or disease transmission in a population. A good example of this is in the form of Donald Trump's handling of the COVID-19 pandemic of 2020. With his open mocking of minimal infections equating to minimal action, the scary part of exponential growth was sorely ignored, being that that's where lockdowns should have started. I'll cut time on the politics, but the gist here is that in February 26, there were only 15 recorded cases. March 1st, 40. March 14th, 4,800. That's an increase in a factor of 120, or a doubling approximately every 2 days. In early November, there were 10 million cases. Recall that by the way of the concept of doubling, the last doubling period before 10 million would only have been 5 million. Had lockdowns been issued 1 week later for a doubling period of 7 days, there would have been 20 million cases of COVID in the US. It's more or less the same concept with climate, only slower, but the lessons still stand. There needs to be immediate and lasting action regarding the actual core of this problem being emissions due to lack of clean and renewable energy sources before bad things start happening. 1950s London literally got blanketed in smog due to extreme emissions, and Islamabad seems to have taken inspiration. More piling emissions into the North Pole as well leads to record level Arctic ice and snowmelt, meaning rising sea levels and gross habitat losses. Alteration of temporal surficial processes leading to desertification, and acid rain meaning mass crop failure and famine. Changes in pressure differentials, or wind, which incite greater intensity and frequency of tropical storms in the equatorial and tropical zones, and now even in the temperate zones. Then this all combining into humanity. Lots of people, not enough space, and sometimes other people can't afford to give resources. Naturally, neither wants to die, and thus desperation incites violence. Now, without delving into the topic of alternative energy and staying on emissives, the concept of mitigation just refers to any means of lowering our current rate and level of emissions. Realistically, large populations can achieve this simply by prioritizing reliable public transportation and suitable alternatives to driving. The empowerment, as well, of walkable cities and bikeable cities with mass public transport opportunities. Carbon capture storage is just pumping greenhouse gas into spent oil reserves or porous rock and then sealing them away. For solar radiation reduction, though, it's as simple as shielding or reflecting rays back into space via aerosols or sea salt released into the stratosphere, such that deflection occurs to limit warming. Honestly, though, only viable alternatives actually address the problem in a progressive way through either emissions reduction or elimination, not simply shoving it under the bed and dealing with it even later. The replacement of fossil fuels with sustainable energy like nuclear and surficial truly is the only way to go here. Though what if the policymakers who enact these changes either are clueless or actively working against it for personal interests? Well, much like addressing misinformation and climate denial, to speak of the gross fraudulence in this topic would take thrice the word count of this video just to address the basics. As such, I'm ignoring it, though congressions such as the Kyoto Protocol and Paris Agreements go into greater detail. Beyond the typical set thresholds for global temperature anomalies, carbon credits were conceived as a way for businesses to collaborate in an ecological manner. For every credit being 1 ton of averted CO2 emissions, a company below their allotted emissive limit can sell their credits to other businesses who may need to emit more, yet still with the limitation of both. This system is used in both Europe and all of North America too, but with conservative parties in the US and Germany taking rise, such as the AfD and US Republican Party, in favor of fossil fuels and deregulation, we'll just have to see how things play out, especially with such massive emitters. Seriously though, the future is uncertain. There are so many people willing to help and contribute to this problem in any real way just because they love the world. They want to see it healthy and beautiful for everyone else after and beside them to be able to appreciate and wander through it for generations to come. Humans, though the dominant species and ultimate apex predator, are not the masters of the earth. We are its stewards. We have to respect it as our home. Climate change is such a serious and real problem, and it only gets worse the longer it's delayed for action. And myself personally am willing to dedicate myself to this field for the betterment of the human future. I can only hope that many more beside me and those who will wander after can find the same joy in this world as those who came before us did. People need to be educated about these topics in a productive and unbiased manner, as well in digestible yet efficient ways, just to have even more people talking about it. Like, it seriously isn't impossible. We truly can win. We can get there if we want, but we have to do it together and put our faith in in science. Thank you.